going to start off by talking to you about the last public presentation and workshop. We had a very interesting turnout. We had responses from across Ontario. We had a very good turnout locally, but we also had people emailing, twittering, and calling in, and our responses are in the hundreds. From those responses, we heard about preferences for park uses and spaces. And we were delighted to hear that this is going to be different than a typical municipal park. This was going to satisfy Ontario and Ontarians. How do we do that? We received a lot of information. We looked at images and types of uses that could occur. And there were predominantly images that were chosen that reflected iconic type of landscapes, landscapes that are passive in nature, places for family, places for interaction, places to really explore nature. And this was a very clear message to us, very different from bringing in programmed facilities and structured facilities on the site. Some of the ideas that came out were biking and walking, trail systems that move through the site in a type of landscape that can be varied. Family fun, the idea that a family could come here and feel very comfortable, both in the spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter. Places to play, an exploration of topography, various types of spaces. Right now the site is 90% paved asphalt, and it is flat. We have the opportunity now to explore elevation change, different heights, different prospects, and different materials. And of course, native plantings. At the table that I was sitting at, I think we had the Native Plant Society representative, and we had representatives from the community as well as design professionals. We had quite a mix, and I think many of the tables had various mixes as well. Very sophisticated responses from these groups. But it's important that when we look at a park that is of Ontario, that we look at plantings that are of Ontario as well. Not only a cross-section across Ontario, but what exists on the shores of Lake Ontario. What will survive? What will grow naturally? And how can we create a landscape that is going to be sustainable? One of the other ideas that have came up was the idea of just hanging out. Let's not try to program this. Let's try to create some spaces for contemplation, whether it's on your own or with a significant other. How can we create spaces that are on the water's edge, that celebrate the water's edge? We took this information along with other biophysical constraints and our detailed understanding of the site. There's climatic influences, there's soil influences, there's contextual influences, the future phase of the revitalization of Ontario Place. We took all of this into consideration, how this park is linking to the trail system and to the greater part of Toronto. We started sketching from Rotterdam to New York to Toronto. Westgate and LANDinc worked hard with the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, with Infrastructure Ontario, Waterfront Toronto, the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority, and many other stakeholders and interest groups have taken part in this process. We looked at how do we create landscape where none existed before. This is a landfill project. This was not native soil material. How do we create a landscape that represents the Ontario landscape, the shores of Ontario? We looked at types of landscapes that create protection from winds, harsh winds in the winter and the shoulder seasons. As landscape architects, it's important for us to extend the use of a site, and we call it human comfort or thermal comfort. We try to create thermal comfort in spaces that allow us to use a landscape for maybe 2 to 3 months longer than you may in an exposed type of site. So we're going to look at using plant material, type of structured landscape that will offer that opportunity. Of course, there's the pragmatic constraints, dealing with site access, dealing with the existing connectivity from Remembrance Drive and Lakeshore into other parts of Ontario Place that have to be maintained, fire access and emergency services, the idea of the shoreline, the constraints around that, the maintenance of the shoreline to make it safe so that we can get people right to the water's edge and not be worried that they're going to be pulled in by large waves, which is spectacular here if you come out here in stormy events. It's quite spectacular. Scale comparisons. This is important for us as designers, as well as stakeholders and the community and the public, to understand what will fit on this type of site. It's a linear site. It is 7.5 acres. It is not a very large site as a first phase, but it's enough to communicate a public park and make Ontario Place accessible. And as a first phase leading into the big revitalization plan, it's a perfect spot to develop. Here we have examples of an ice rink. First example, the baseball diamond, a gathering space for those who know Millennium Park in Chicago. And then closer to home, we have the Shakespeare in High Park and Toronto Music Garden spaces. So you can start to get a sense for the type of scale of activities that could happen in this park and trail at Ontario Place. And then the final one is the promenade, City of Toronto's promenade with the wave decks. And that gives you a sense of what might be possible. And then we look at inspiration. It's been very refreshing to be working with West 8 out of Rotterdam and New York. They bring a very unique perspective, and they have experience working in Toronto. But they could remind us, and I think we feel that as Ontarians, we sometimes overlook what is special about what we have. And it's refreshing to see and to hear how those special typologies and landscapes from the Hudson Bay lowlands all the way to the shores of Lake Ontario and everything in between is unique. And how can we try to bring that unique landscape into this park? If we can simplify the design, there's two very main components to the park for the design: the lower park and the upper park. The lower park is a park that is closely related to the water. It touches the water. It allows for interaction of edges, both between the upper and lower and on the water's edge. It's protected in areas. The upper park is wooded. It's a woodlot. It's a forest. And we're exploring the types of forests that could exist here. What's natural, what will survive, what's Ontario. The upper park feel is a wooded lot, but it's also an accessible wooded lot. It's an area where people can enjoy spaces in shaded areas. It's also an area where you may have places that are protected that are inaccessible to allow various plant communities to thrive and to increase our natural health of the city, of the users, and of the future development. The lower park feel is one of a more pastoral feeling. It's an openness. It's creating flexibility for a number of activities to take place, whether they're community events, whether they're ethnic events, whether they're small groups of people. This is where we really want your input and how to program these spaces. And we're very excited about sitting down on these three stations to really get your input on how this can be developed further. In the end, we're creating a feel-good park, and this is the message that we've received from everybody. It's a park where we can integrate people with nature. And again, this is where we want your feedback as well, and how does that look? How does that get developed? Whether it's on the upper park area, whether it's on the edge of a woodlot or forest, amongst tall grass plantings, whether it's next to the shoreline. Another major component of the park is the trail system, pathway system. It's a continuous circuit that runs through the site. This is very important to the design because the first phase of the park terminates at the southernmost point. The future phases will continue around Ontario Place, but right now we have to make this park work in the short term. The idea that you can come into the park and you can come along the lower edge with multiple areas to get up to the upper park, but also to be able to circle around, go over top of the lower park with a bridge, and then come back. And this type of activity could be continuous. You can do this for 15 minutes, a half an hour, 2 hours, and along that route, you're passing through a number of different experiences and perceptions of space and landscape. The Waterfront Trail System, this park will connect to the Martin Goodman Trail, the Toronto Waterfront Trail System. It is very important, the intersection of these two places. This is a spur along the Martin Goodman Trail. It's an important intersection where we can pull people from a very accessible, pedestrian accessible area and get people to pull off, park their bikes, or bring them in a leisurely way into the park and enjoy the different aspects. The unlimited views. The park design enhances what exists right now. For over 40 years, this space has been inaccessible. It's been a staff parking lot, closed to the public. So these views are unique to the public. What we have done is looked at opportunities to enhance those views, both, as Walter had mentioned, back to the city and out to the lake and beyond. The feedback that we've received has been delicately placed on the site. We've looked at zones and relationships for activities. We've emphasized certain words and types of uses that relate to the number of people that have responded to those uses. This is a starting place for our work tonight. This is what we're going to take. We're going to ask for criticism of this. We're going to ask for constructive feedback on how this should evolve into something more developed. I'm going to walk you through the various aspects of the park. There are three main parts to the park. The north end of the park, we have here on the western edge, which is the existing access to Ontario Place. It is also fire access and emergency services and connects to facilities that are operating currently on Ontario Place. The pedestrian access to the park happens here on the north side. Your sense of arrival happens underneath a bridge, and the idea whether that is an architectonic bridge, a natural bridge, these are things that we're exploring right now. But that you come through a landscape that is diverse in nature and that it opens up to a sense of discovery, and your view opens up to the water and the lake. You have a choice of going right to the waterfront, the shore, touch the water, or extend your experience along the lower trail, or you can turn right into a zone that is called the Esplanade. The Esplanade is an area that we feel, and the design team has studied as a space that is protected. It's right up against the upper park edge. It's an area where you can have a coffee, have a beverage. Maybe there's programmed space here in the future that will allow some sort of rest. It's also an area where you can view and look over the romantic garden where kids can play and families can picnic. A section which is a cut-through section through the site in this area shows what this might look like. You have the lake edge, you have the lower trail system, you have a romantic garden that may have rock outcrops that emulate parts of Ontario. You have the Esplanade. The Esplanade is the area that is protected, sheltered from the westerly winds. And then potential program space. which we are exploring right now. An artistic impression of that view, the elevation, the prospect. Further down, we have the area that we're calling the waist of the park, the linear park. This is also an area where a major component is a scramble. The scramble is what exists between the upper trail and the lower trail. It is an area that is created from natural stone and rock from different parts of Ontario, and we're now investigating what that composition is. It's an area for climbing, it's an area for activity and fun, and also an area for spontaneous sculpture making of stone. A section through that and through the tightest part of the site, still maintaining the lower and upper park, the upper park trail system with periodic filtered views of the water in the city, but also the rock and scramble that will allow for activities, sculpture built in, whether it's integrated, whether it's something that comes at a later date, integrated into a setting that becomes a pebble beach, a rock beach, something that is also reminiscent of Ontario landscapes. Here's an artistic impression. You see these ideas of potential integrated sculpture, and we're looking at ideas of maybe that this becomes part of the natural heritage, monsters of the lake, potentially First Nations work that could be integrated into this project. And we're hoping very much to be able to get your feedback on that this evening. Here are some more examples. Pushing the boundaries and dealing with fantasy, dealing with play. All of this culminates in the southernmost point. We come to what we're calling the summit. It's a hill. It's a viewing area that gets the greatest views of Lake Ontario, panoramic views. It's an area that's 6 to 7 meters high above the lower trail. It's an area where you can get views back into Ontario Place. It's an area you can get views back to the city. It's also one of the most exposed areas on the site, and we're currently looking at mechanisms to create small sheltered spaces so that you can get small groups of people that feel comfortable in the shoulder seasons, but also to allow that space to exist for larger groups of people to enjoy. Here's a section just coming up to the summit and one of the potential pathway systems that cuts through from the lower park to the upper park. We now are looking forward to your comments. We received incredible feedback from the last presentation and the last workshop. We're looking to enhance this design. We're looking to find out ways of making it a park that is unique to Ontario, different from Manitoba, different from New Brunswick. What makes this an Ontario park? And we hope to receive your feedback and looking forward to the 3 sessions.
Thanks, Patrick, and to the presenters. So we have about 15 minutes that we'd planned on using as a full room, and we thought we'd use this time. If you have any questions of clarification for any of the presenters, or we've got some other folks in the room that might be able to help answer, I'm going to wander around with the mic right now, so just put your hand up. Also, if you're online, you can, at the bottom of the page, just so you don't miss it, you can press Ask a Question, and we'll make sure every once in a while you'll flag, and I'll make my way over, and we'll ask a question over there. This is also the time where if you have any thoughts, initial reactions to what you've seen, something that you like, or some refinement you would like the team to consider, let me know. So I'm just going to move around. Yulia's up here taking notes, and we will have a detailed report of the results of the meeting the whole time. So I'm just going to start, and I'll kind of go down this way, and then I'll come back up this way, or I might zigzag, we'll see. And you guys, Dushan, you've got the mic there, great. And this is Dan, right? Don. If you're not super keen on, this is for the benefit of folks online, if you're not super keen on being filmed, just put your hand up somewhere. But, well,